April 6th of 2015, Secretary General meets President of the Seventh-day Adventist World Church. This is the United Nations website here. And, of course, that's Ted Wilson, the former president of the General Conference. We have a new president right now. And in regard to this was April 6th, 2015. Don't miss that date, because that's when he met with the United Nations. Now, what happened around this time? We'll come to this. Well, around this time, we had another man here who was made the Director of Public Affairs and Religious Liberty of the Worldwide Seventh-day Adventist General Conference Church. And he was elected in July of 2015. So he wasn't there in April 2015. But was he there? Or was he not? Was he there? I don't know. We'll come back to that. Here's the man who was made the new Religious Liberty Director of the church, but he was the Associate Director before. He just kind of switched hats on the same page here, and they're all pushing the same agenda. And Dr. Bercia, Nelu Bercia, started working at the General Conference in October of 2015. When did Ted Wilson meet with the United Nations? April 2015. So we got April, we've got July, and then we've got October 2015. Okay, lots happening in 2015. Interesting how this works. Now, this is April 7th, back to April 7th, 2015. You'll notice that this is before Ganoon Diop was elected as the Religious Liberty Director. This is before. So when was he elected Religious Liberty Director? Shortly after April 7th. And what was this picture taken here? Who's in the picture? Ganoon Diop before he was elected as the General Conference Religious Liberty Director. And remember that word, religious liberty, because I think they misunderstand that word to a large extent. But this is a historic meeting, we're told. And the Adventist Review writes about it. On April 7th, 2015, they say the first Adventist church president to meet with a UN chief noted that the church has long supported religious liberty and said it was willing to team up on initiatives that followed Christ's ministry of helping people physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually. April 7th, 2015. Very important dates. Notice this statement. Do you see the date on this statement here? It's about immunization right here up at the top. What date was that made? This official statement on immunization. Do you see the date? Doesn't that seem a little close to this date right here, April 7th? April 15th, 2015. You almost notice that they're like a week apart. That after a historic meeting with the United Nations, we have an official statement on immunization a week later. That's kind of interesting how that works. I think that there's something to it. Now, I'm just going to read you a little bit of this. It said, we encourage responsible immunization and of course, VACCINATION, and have no religious or faith-based reason not to encourage our adherents to responsibly participate in protective and preventative immunization programs. So we don't have a religious or faith-based reason not to encourage people to take part in that. Do we have a religious and faith-based reason to encourage others not to participate in that? I think we do. But anyways, it says, we are not the conscience of the individual church member, and we recognize individual choices. These choices are exercised by the individual. Refusal of immunization is not and should not be seen as a teaching nor a doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I don't know. My doctrines definitely teach that we are to regard the body as the temple of God. When I say the temple of God, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in detail today, because we're talking about who his church is, what his house is, what his building is. And what does the Bible say about defiling the temple of God? If we defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. That would be 1 Corinthians chapter 3, right? Any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are. You're the church, you're the temple, you're the house, you're the building. And so don't destroy the temple of God, don't defile it. Now, if I was to think about someone who might have defiled it, there was someone who was asked to defile it in the book of Daniel, chapter 1. Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. with the portion of the king's meat or with the wine which he drank. This is kind of like the wine of Babylon. And he didn't want to be babbling on, because who hath woe, who hath babbling, who hath wounds without a cause, they that tarry long at the mixed wine that moves itself aright in the cup, right? The fermenting wine, which is not grape juice. It's really alcoholic wine. And so Daniel didn't drink the wine of Babylon, and he would not eat of the king's meat. He wouldn't put something like, say pork into his body or blood or something that was contrary to God's law. There were certain things he didn't touch because his body was the temple of God, and he was not to defile the temple of God. Is this a doctrine that God's people are taught regarding the temple of God? Do we believe these doctrines and understand these doctrines, or are these doctrines taught by our church as a people? Now, coming back here, it says, refusal of immunization is not and should not be seen as a teaching or doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, I've shared the list of ingredients in a lot of these immunizations, and they include pork, they include dogs, they include monkeys, they include human embryos, they include mercury, they include formaldehyde, they include all kinds of things. Now, if I was to put that into my body and drink some formaldehyde or drink some aluminum or drink some pork or whatever, and I just drank it or ate it, right? Would that be defiling the temple of God? Clearly, right? Anybody who understands just a little bit of just science knows this. Now, if I stick it straight into my bloodstream and just put a needle in my arm and just put it right in there, am I defiling the temple of God if I stick it straight in the blood? Isn't our food converted to blood? Isn't that what the Bible and the Spirit of prophecy teach? Right? So that's what we're doing. Instead of just putting it into our bloodstream through our stomachs, we put it in our bloodstream through our arms, which goes straight into the blood. You want a boost, you get a boost. And that's exactly what they do. So they know that if you put it straight in your blood, that it's going to go straight to, and not just that, but it affects your blood is where your life is. And your life is your mind, your character, everything. Everything is in your blood. That's where God gives you everything. So this is your life. And what are you doing? Destroying your life. And if any man destroys the temple of God, him shall God destroy. That's a definite doctrine that's important in regards to being a biblical Christian. And Daniel in ancient Babylon went through something similar. But what about modern day Babylon? In the book of Revelation chapter 18:23, it says, by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And I'd like to just talk about this for a brief second. The word there for sorceries is the Greek word pharmakia. That's the original. It was written in Greek by John the Apostle, and he wrote the word pharmakia in the Bible. Where do we get this word from? Pharmakia? It's a Greek word. So when we talk about a pharmacy or a pharmacist or big pharma, it's telling us that by thy sorceries, by thy pharmakia, were all nations deceived. In other words, by big pharma, were all nations deceived. If you look up the definition of this type of pharma, it's actually the use of or the administering of drugs or poisoning. This is from your Greek lexicon. It actually means to poison someone. It actually means to sorcery. Magical arts often found in connection with idolatry and fostered by it. So what is this then? Is this of God? Is this a doctrine? Maybe a doctrine that refusal of immunization should not be seen as teaching doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church? What doctrine are they teaching? They're definitely not teaching biblical doctrine when they're teaching it's okay to put this stuff into our bodies, right? That's definitely not the temple of God anymore. It's somebody else's temple it's becoming. And since the temple of God, I just want to just briefly read just a portion of scripture here in 2 Corinthians chapter 6. It says this about the temple of God. It says, be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. Now, would the United Nations